Well, kind of two questions. What percentage would you say signifies someone having a wreck? And then if someone does have a wreck, should they be starting to look in different places outside of what you just mentioned?
Man, the percentage to certify a wreck is a hard hard question to answer, I think, because um, you know 80% for someone might be normal and 80% for someone else might be a wreck, right? Um, so I guess it would probably be easier to answer that in relation to like your previous result, right? So maybe not blanket across the industry, but if it's 10% less than what you typically have, probably take a harder look at maybe some of these details and look back on some management, try to find those outliers that or different patterns, right, in those open cows to try to identify maybe what's going on. Um, and then you had mentioned some ways that you might be able to tease out, right, what what that might be, the source might be, right? So to me, the easiest starting point is to maybe see how widespread it is versus how isolated it is. So I think about that, my mind kind of works in flow charts where do we have open cows in every breeding pasture or are they concentrated to one, right? If it's concentrated to one breeding pasture, did we observe breeding activity? If that answer is yes, we at least know that cows or females are cycling, and our bulls are mounting them, and right, and then that we can kind of the next level to that is, well, did we do a BSE? Do we know the fertility status of that bull, right? So we can kind of take this in steps. The situations where maybe you have open cows in every breeding pasture, that might be something more along the lines of, is it more age related or body condition related? Those first calf heifers that are trying to raise their first calf are notoriously those females that do come up open, right? We know that they have lower pregnancy rates, kind of as a general rule, just because they're still growing and raising a calf and lactating all at the same time. So those kind of more across the whole entire herd, those are harder to pick apart because it might just be you did have some heat stress, but some animals are more susceptible to that than others, right? And it's not easy for us to pick apart those types of things. So late calvers is another one, right? So if you have females in every breeding pasture that come up open, but you start to dig further and you start to notice that, well, they all tended to calve late last year. That tries to answer some of that question because they maybe weren't cycling at the start of the breeding season and they just never had an opportunity to get pregnant. So does that kind of go to answer your question a little bit, or anything that you'd like to dig
Yeah, I
deeper on there?
yeah, I mean, I think those are all. I appreciate you talking about your mind works in a flow chart and how you kind
Yeah.
of start and how you work through that process. Lacey, one thing we haven't touched on is disease.
Yeah.
And what would maybe be some signs that producers should maybe consult with their vet, or maybe they need to change their pre-breeding vaccines, or just any signs or symptoms that they should be aware of that maybe there is something going through their herd?
So I think consulting with a vet, regardless of, if regardless of maybe the percentage of loss that is, I should say percentage of pregnancy rate that you have, right? If it's something you're concerned about, absolutely, a veterinarian's a great resource to talk through that with. They're going to be your best resource when it comes to vaccination protocols, and thinking through what you need to protect your herd from, right? I think maybe the type of records that you should be aware of when you go to your vet to talk through some of this is, are we having maybe like differences between our pregnancy rate, right? So at preg check time versus our calving rate, right? If those are wildly different, that's something to definitely bring to your veterinarian, or to make note of and bring up to your veterinarian. I think another thing to to really make note of is if you know of any neighboring cattle that got into your herd, or your herd got into other herds, right? If you know that and know an instance of that, definitely make note of it and bring it to your veterinarian, and that's going to help them be able to serve you in the best way possible too, right? So we can make sure that biosecurity is on the utmost, top notch where it needs to be, and our health programs are where they need to be. So yeah, by all means, your veterinarian's a great resource when it comes to all those things, whatever your concern is. If it's just a lower pregnancy rate in general or something more specific, definitely head to your veterinarian.